The rain was falling in sheets over the alien marketplace, drumming against metal roofs and splashing into the puddles between uneven stone paths. Crowds of different species hurried past, their faces hidden under hoods and masks, their voices muffled by the storm. Among them walked Daniel, the only human in sight, his head down, trying not to attract attention. His left hand was wrapped in a thin strip of cloth, the damp fabric clinging to the skin beneath. He kept it hidden for a reason, because what lay under it was the one thing that could get him killed here. He ducked into a narrow alley, trying to avoid the patrolling guards. The planet's capital was no place for a human without papers, and Daniel had learned to keep moving, never staying in one place long enough for someone to remember his face. But tonight, something felt different. He could feel eyes on him, watching, following. He glanced back, but the crowd blurred into a wall of strangers, each rushing to escape the cold rain. The alley opened into a quieter street lined with stalls selling strange glowing fruits, carved bone trinkets, and steaming bowls of alien soup. He moved quickly, passing the shopkeepers without making eye contact. Then, just as he stepped past the corner of a silk-draped booth, a voice cut through the noise. It was soft, almost drowned out by the storm, but sharp enough to stop him in his tracks. "I finally found you, human." Daniel froze. The words carried an odd weight, not just curiosity, but recognition's certainty. Slowly, he turned his head. Standing just a few feet away was a young alien woman, her hood falling back to reveal luminous violet eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. Her skin was smooth, a pale shade with faint golden patterns running across her cheeks like natural tattoos. Her long hair, black with strands of deep iridescent purple, clung to her face in the rain. She was staring at him as if she had been searching for years for a moment. Daniel thought she might be mistaking him for someone else, but then her gaze dropped to his hand. Before he could react, she stepped forward, her movements fluid and deliberate. She reached out, fingers brushing the wet cloth around his palm. With surprising speed, she pulled the wrapping away, revealing the scar jagged, faintly glowing under the storm's gray light. Her breath caught. The noise of the marketplace seemed to vanish around them. "It's real," she whispered, almost to herself. Her eyes widened, and something like fear flashed across her face. "You carry the mark. You're the one." Daniel's first instinct was to pull his hand back, but her grip tightened. He could feel strength in her fingers, more than her delicate appearance suggested. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "I'm nobody." She shook her head. "No. They told me you were gone. They told me you died before I could find you." Her voice trembled, but her stare never left his hand. "Do you even know what this means?" Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but movement in the corner of his vision caught his attention. 3 armored guards pushing through the crowd, their eyes scanning faces. The woman saw them too. Without warning, she grabbed his arm and pulled him into the shadows between 2 stalls. "Come with me," she said sharply. Now, he almost resisted. She was a stranger, clearly from one of the noble houses by the look of her fine clothes beneath the travel cloak. But there was something in her tone urgent, commanding, that told him she wasn't asking out of kindness. The guards were getting closer, their voices barking orders. Against his better judgment, Daniel let her lead him deeper into the maze of back streets. They weaved through narrow corridors lit by flickering blue lanterns, the smell of damp stone and cooking fires filling the air. Every step, Daniel's mind raced. Who was she? How did she know about the scar? And why did it feel like the moment she saw it, everything about his life shifted in a direction he didn't understand? Finally, she stopped in front of a sealed door made of heavy black metal. She placed her palm against a glowing panel, and with a soft hiss, the door slid open. She pushed him inside and followed, sealing it behind them. The room was small, lined with strange devices, the air warm and dry compared to the street outside. Daniel took a step back, keeping his eyes on her. "All right," he said, his voice low. "You've been following me. You saw the scar. Now tell me, who are you?" The woman lowered her hood fully, letting her hair spill over her shoulders. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of relief and deep sorrow. She took a slow step toward him, her gaze locking with his as if trying to measure his reaction. "My name is Serenia," she said, "and that scar on your hand belongs to my people, to my bloodline. And if I'm right," she hesitated, her voice catching just slightly, "you are the reason our war never ended." Daniel stared at her, the words sinking in like ice. What? The rain outside roared against the roof, but inside the small room, silence pressed down on both of them. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of the scar, not just as an old wound, but as something far more dangerous. Daniel didn't move. He could feel her eyes drilling into him, as if she could see more than just the scar. The air in the small room felt heavier now, as if even the walls were holding their breath. Serenia stood still for a moment, then, slowly, walked toward a metal table in the corner. She picked up a small silver device and placed it on the table between them. It projected a faint blue hologram of a strange symbol shaped exactly like the scar on Daniel's hand. He looked at it, uneasy. "That's the same." "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "It's the crest of Orith, a mark given only to those chosen by the Oracle before the Great War began." Daniel frowned. Chosen for what? Serenia's eyes narrowed. "For the key." Her words didn't make sense, and she must have seen the confusion on his face because she continued without pause. "My people believed the key would be carried by a warrior strong enough to open the Gate of Echoes. A gate that leads to the vault where the first king stored the only weapon that can end the war. For generations, both sides searched for the one who bore the mark. No. And when no one could find him, we thought it was only a story told to keep hope alive." Daniel stepped back, his chest tightening. "I'm not your warrior. I'm not part of your war. I don't even know how I got this scar." Serenia tilted her head. "Then tell me, how did you survive the attack at Redwater?" The name hit him like a punch. He hadn't heard it in years, but the memory came rushing back the night his unit was ambushed on the riverbanks, the sky burning, the ground shaking under artillery fire. He remembered pulling a wounded friend into cover, and then came blinding light, and the sound of something like a voice whispering inside his head before everything went black. When he woke up, the scar was there. He didn't answer, but she must have read the truth in his silence. "The Oracle chose you that night," she said quietly. "You were marked to be found. And now that you are here, everything changes." Before Daniel could speak, a deep, metallic knock echoed through the door. Serenia's head snapped toward it, her hand going to a hidden blade at her waist. "They followed us," she whispered. The knock came again, louder this time. A voice boomed from outside, speaking in a language Daniel didn't understand, but the tone was clear in order to open up. Serenia stepped to the door's control panel and tapped something quickly. The lights dimmed, and a section of the back wall hissed open to reveal a narrow escape tunnel. "Go," she said. Daniel shook his head. "What about you?" "I'll hold them," she replied without hesitation. "You need to reach the upper docks. There's a freighter leaving at first light. If they capture you here, you'll never make it out alive." The pounding at the door turned into a heavy crash as something large slammed against it. Daniel hesitated for a second too long, and she grabbed his arm, shoving him toward the tunnel. "Move, human." He stumbled into the passage, the walls so tight his shoulders brushed the sides. Behind him, the sound of the door finally breaking filled the air, followed by shouting and the crack of weapons fire. He wanted to turn back, but every instinct told him she was buying him the only chance he had. He kept moving, his breath loud in the narrow space. The tunnel twisted upward, ending in a grate. Daniel pushed it open and climbed out into the cold night air. The rain had stopped, but the streets were slick and shining under the glow of street lamps. Somewhere in the distance, alarms began to sound. He pulled the cloth back over his hand, hiding the scar again. But it felt like it was burning hotter than before. He didn't know where the upper docks were. But he knew one thing, Neve, what Serenia said was true. The mark on his hand wasn't just an old wound. It was a target. And now, more than ever, it seemed like the entire planet might be hunting him as he slipped into the shadows. He couldn't shake the memory of her voice when she saw the scar, shocked, almost desperate. He didn't know if she was friend or enemy, but one thing was certain. Whoever Serenia was, she had risked everything to keep him alive. And that meant whatever was coming next was going to be far bigger than him. Daniel kept to the shadows, his boots silent on the slick stone streets. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the rooftops, and the night air carried the faint hum of distant machinery. Every now and then, he glanced over his shoulder. The alleyways looked empty, but he knew better. Serenia's warning still rang in his head. They caught him. He wouldn't make it off the planet alive. Up ahead, a street curved sharply to the right, leading toward a cluster of tall buildings. From somewhere beyond them came the faint sound of ship engines warming up. The docks had to be close. He moved quickly, pulling his hood lower to hide his face. But the burn in his hand only grew stronger, as if the scar itself was guiding him more. Betraying him, he passed a row of abandoned market stalls, their bright fabrics fluttering in the damp wind. A shadow shifted between them, and Daniel froze. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a figure step into view, an alien soldier in dark armor, his helmet visor glowing faint blue. The soldier scanned the street, weapon in hand. Daniel backed away slowly, slipping into a narrow side passage before the soldier could turn his way. The passage smelled of oil and rust. Pipes ran along the walls, dripping water into shallow puddles. Daniel kept moving, his heartbeat pounding in his ears, but the quiet didn't last. A voice crackled through some kind of device nearby, followed by the clanging sound of boots on metal. More soldiers. They were sweeping the area, closing in. He reached the end of the passage and emerged into a loading yard. Cargo crates towered over him, marked with alien symbols and blinking lights. In the center, a group of dock workers moved crates onto a low transport vehicle. For a moment, Daniel thought he could blend in, but one of the workers glanced his way and their eyes widened. Without a word, the worker turned and shouted something toward the far side of the yard. Daniel ran. Shouts rose behind him, and the sharp hiss of an energy weapon charging filled the air. A beam of blue light seared past his shoulder, slamming into a crate and sending sparks flying. He ducked between two stacks of cargo, weaving through the narrow gaps until he found a half-open container. Without thinking, he slipped inside and crouched low. Through the small opening, he saw armored boots stomping past. Voices barked orders in the alien language. One boot stopped inches from the container door. Daniel held his breath, his muscles tense. The soldier lingered, scanning the area, then moved on. Daniel waited several seconds before slipping back out the other side. Staying low as he made for the far gate, the upper docks came into view at last, a wide platform overlooking the city, with ships of all shapes and sizes resting on their landing pads. A massive freighter sat at the far end, its engines glowing faint orange. That had to be the ship Serenia meant. Daniel sprinted toward it. Weaving between dock workers and supply carts, he was halfway there when a warning siren wailed across the docks. A voice echoed through loudspeakers, announcing in the local tongue, He didn't need to understand the words every guard in sight turned toward him. The nearest soldiers raised their rifles, and a shot cracked through the air. Daniel dove behind a metal crate, the blast scorching the ground where he had been. The freighter's boarding ramp was lowering, but the distance between him and the ship felt like a mile. He couldn't reach it with the soldiers closing in from both sides. Then he noticed a hover cart loaded with sealed containers parked nearby and humming softly. An idea sparked. He jumped onto the driver's seat, slammed the controls forward, and the cart roared ahead. The sudden burst of speed sent the soldiers scrambling. Daniel steered the cart straight toward the boarding ramp, weaving through obstacles. Energy blasts flew past him, one striking the edge of the cart and showering him with sparks. The freighter's crew shouted in surprise as he barreled toward them. At the last moment, Daniel leaped from the cart, rolling onto the ramp just as the hover cart smashed into a pile of cargo behind him. The ramp began to rise immediately. Soldiers reached the edge of the dock, shouting and firing, but the ship's shields flared to life, deflecting the shots. Daniel stumbled to his feet, breathing hard, his heart hammering in his chest. The scar on his hand was glowing faintly, now hidden under the damp cloth but impossible to ignore as the freighter lifted off. He looked back through the closing hatch. The city below was a maze of glowing streets and towering spires, already fading into the distance. Somewhere down there, Serenia was either alive and fighting or captured. Either way, she had sent him here for a reason. And now he was heading into unknown space with a mark that could change the fate of entire worlds. The freighter's engines rumbled deep beneath Daniel's feet as the ship cut through the clouds. The air inside was warmer than the cold streets below, but his pulse hadn't slowed. He leaned against the metal wall of the small cargo hold, trying to steady his breathing. Every part of him wanted to collapse, but he knew this wasn't over. A heavy clang echoed from the far side of the room. The sound of footsteps followed slow, deliberate. From the shadows emerged a tall alien, male with dark gray skin and ridged lines running down his cheeks. His eyes, narrow and amber, studied Daniel in silence. Behind him, two more crew members stepped forward, both armed. "You're not supposed to be here," the tall one said in a low voice. Daniel straightened but didn't move closer. "I just needed passage off the planet. I can pay." The alien shook his head. "It's not about payment, it's about trouble. And you, human, look like nothing but trouble." Daniel's fingers tightened around the edge of the damp cloth covering his hand. "Look, I just need to get to the next station. After that, I'm gone. You'll never see me again." One of the armed crews snorted. "We already know who you are." Word travels fast when half the city is hunting a human with a glowing mark on his hand. The tall alien's gaze dropped to Daniel's left hand. "Show me." Daniel stayed still. That's not going to happen. The silence between them grew heavy. The tall alien stepped closer, his shadow falling over Daniel. "If you're the one they say you are, you're not just a passenger, you're a danger to everyone on this ship." Before Daniel could reply, a sharp voice rang out from the hatch above. "Enough, Corvin. If the human wanted to kill us, he'd have done it before boarding." All heads turned. A woman stepped down the ladder into the hold, slender, with pale blue skin and short silver hair that shimmered under the overhead lights. Her eyes were bright and calculating, scanning Daniel as though weighing his worth. She wore a dark pilot's jacket, its collar lined with fur, and a small sidearm rested easily at her hip. "I'm Captain Rayless," she said. "And you're going to tell me why Serenia risked her life to send you here?" The name hit him hard. "You know her." Rayless' expression didn't change. "She's owed me a debt for a long time, and now she's calling it in." Daniel hesitated. "She said the mark on my hand was important." that it belonged to her people, that it meant something about a weapon that could end their war. Corvin's lip curled. The Gate of Echoes. That old myth again. Rayla's gaze sharpened. It's not a myth. And if Serenia believes this human is the key, then we have a problem because the Syndicate won't stop until they have him. Daniel's voice was tight. The Syndicate. They're the ones hunting me. They're more than hunters, Rayla said. They control half this sector. And if they believe you can open that gate, they'll burn entire worlds to make you theirs. A low hum filled the room, followed by a faint tremor underfoot. Corvin's eyes narrowed. We're being followed. Rayla climbed back up the ladder in 3 quick steps, her voice barking orders. The crew scattered, leaving Daniel alone for a moment. He moved to the nearest viewport and looked out into the darkness of space. Far behind them, several sharp points of light glimmered too steady to be stars. Ships dot the deck, shook again. Harder this time. Alarms wailed. Daniel grabbed a support rail to steady himself as a voice shouted over the comm system to syndicate interceptors on our tail. They're locking weapons. The captain's voice cut through the chaos. Corvin. Get the turrets online. Hold them off as long as you can. The freighter swerved sharply, sending Daniel stumbling. He could hear the muffled thump of gunfire as the ship's weapons answered the threat. His mind raced Tiff. The Syndicate caught them now. Serenia's sacrifice would be for nothing. The hatch to the hold slammed open again, and Rayla dropped down, tossing him a small metal cylinder. You said you wanted to pay for your passage? Earn it. That's a pulse charge. You're going to help me plant it in their docking port when they try to board. Daniel caught it, the metal cold in his hand, and if they don't try to board. They will, she said flatly, because they want you alive. The ship lurched violently, lights flickering. A new alarm blared a docking clamp warning. Corvin's voice roared over the comm. They're attaching to our starboard hatch. Rayla grinned without humor. Guess you're up, human. Daniel's grip tightened on the pulse charge. His scar was burning again, brighter than ever beneath the cloth, almost as if it knew what was coming. He took a steadying breath and followed Rayla toward the starboard hatch. The pounding of boots on metal echoed ahead of them, the sound of Syndicate soldiers preparing to come through. He didn't know if this plan would work. He didn't know if he'd survive the next 10 minutes. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going back to being a man who just ran from trouble. Not anymore. The starboard hatch groaned under the pressure of the docking clamps. A deep metallic thud rang through the corridor as the Syndicate ship locked into place. Red emergency lights strobed along the walls, painting the narrow passage in flashes of crimson. Daniel stood beside Captain Rayla, the pulse charge clutched tightly in his left hand. The scar beneath the cloth was hot, almost painfully so. Wait for my signal, Rayla whispered. Her hand hovered over the release panel for the hatch. From the other side came the hiss of cutting tools. The circular door began to glow at its edges as the Syndicate soldiers burned through. Boots thudded. Voices barked short commands. Daniel's heart pounded in time with the pulse of the scar. The moment the cut was complete, the hatch blew inward with a deafening crash. Smoke and sparks filled the corridor, and armored figures surged through 3 in front, more behind them. Rayla fired first, her blaster bolts slamming into the lead soldier's chest plate. He stumbled, but didn't fall. Their armor was thick, built for boarding fights. Daniel ducked low, rolling to the side as a shot scorched the wall behind him. Rayla was already moving, drawing their fire away. He saw his chance, darting forward through the smoke toward the docking ring where the Syndicate ship connected. The soldiers didn't notice him at first, too focused on the captain. One turned at the last second, raising his rifle. Daniel's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, his left hand came up, the cloth slipping away. The glowing scar flared brilliantly, casting white-blue light across the walls. The soldier froze mid-step, his body locking up as if some unseen force held him in place. Daniel's breath caught, but his hand moved on its own, hurling him forward. He slammed the pulse charge into the docking port and twisted it into place. A sharp beep sounded, and the device's lights began to flash rapidly. "Charge set," he shouted. Ra-E-Les heard him and dove backward into cover. "Now get down." The explosion was small, but brutal. The blast tore the docking clamps apart, sending debris spinning into space. The Syndicate soldiers staggered as the connection between the two ships broke. Emergency shields flared to keep the air inside the freighter, but the enemy was already retreating, pulled back toward their drifting vessel. One soldier, the closest to Daniel, tried to grab him as he fell back. But as his hand touched Daniel's glowing scar, a shockwave of light burst outward. The soldier screamed and flew backward, slamming into the far wall before crumpling. Daniel stumbled, gasping, the light fading from his hand. The freighter's engines roared to life, pulling them away from the Syndicate craft. Raylis came up beside him, eyes wide. "That wasn't just luck. What did you do?" Daniel shook his head, still breathing hard. "I don't know. It just happened." A Corvan's voice came over the comm. "They're breaking off. We're clear for now." The captain looked at Daniel's hand, still faintly glowing. "Serenia was right about you," she said. "That mark isn't just a sign, it's a weapon." Daniel pulled the cloth back. Over it, his mind spinning. He'd always thought the scar was just a strange, unhealed wound from the battle at Redwater. But whatever had happened tonight proved it was something far more dangerous. And if he could use it like that, maybe the stories about the Gate of Echoes weren't just stories. Rayla straightened, her tone sharp again. "Get some rest. We'll need to change course. The Syndicate won't stop after this. They'll call in more ships. If you want to survive, you'll need to start thinking like someone they can't catch." Daniel nodded slowly. He wasn't sure what to think yet. Part of him wanted to get as far away from this war as possible. But another part, one he didn't want to admit, was curious. If this power was real, maybe he could do more than just run. Maybe he could end whatever had started the night he got this scar. As he turned to leave the corridor, he glanced back toward the viewport. The Syndicate ship was a small shadow now, drifting in the distance, but something told him they weren't finished. Somewhere out there, Serenia was still waiting for him, and the war she spoke of was only getting closer. The freighter moved through deep space, its engines a constant low hum. Daniel sat alone in the crew quarters, staring at his hand. The scar no longer glowed, but he could still feel a faint warmth under the skin, like an ember that refused to die out. He replayed the moment in his head, the soldier freezing, the shockwave of light, and the way Raylis had looked at him afterward. It hadn't been just surprise. It had been recognition. The hatch to the quarters slid open, and Corvin stepped inside. His heavy footsteps made the metal floor creak. He tossed Daniel a sealed water pack and leaned against the wall. "We're meeting someone in an hour," he said. "A contact of Serenia's. Captain thinks you need to hear what they have to say." Daniel frowned, who Corvin's face didn't change. "You'll see." An hour later, Daniel stood with Raylis and Corvin in the freighter's docking bay. The ship had stopped at a small, unregistered station, little more than a cluster of metal spheres held together by thick cables. A single figure waited for them as the airlock opened, cloaked in dark blue robes. The hood hid their face, but Daniel could feel their gaze on him immediately. The figure stepped forward and pulled back the hood. She was older than Serenia, but the resemblance was clear. The same violet eyes, the same gold-lined markings on her cheeks. Her hair was streaked with silver, and a pendant hung from her neck, engraved with the same symbol as Daniel's scar. "I am Marin," she said softly. "Serenia is my niece." Daniel's chest tightened. "Is she alive?" Marin nodded. "Yes, but she is in danger. The Syndicate knows she found you." Raylis folded her arms. "Tell him the rest." Marin's gaze locked on Daniel. "That mark on your hand is not just a weapon, it is a seal. It was placed there by the Oracle of Orith to bind a fragment of our ancient power to you. You are not one of us by blood, but the mark makes you part of our line. That is why Serenia called you the One." Daniel shook his head. "I'm not a soldier in your war." "I didn't ask for any of this." "No," Marin agreed. "But you were chosen because of what you did at Redwater. You saved lives when everyone else fled. The Oracle saw that choice and marked you as the bearer of the key. Only you can open the Gate of Echoes, and once it is opened, the war will end one way or another." Corvin's eyes narrowed. "Or it will destroy us all." Marin didn't deny it. "The Gate holds a weapon powerful enough to decide the fate of every world in this sector. If the Syndicate opens it first, they will rule unchallenged for centuries. That is why Serenia searched for you, and why she risked everything to send you here." Daniel's pulse quickened. "And if I refuse?" Marin's voice grew heavy. "Then the war will continue until nothing is left. My people will fall, and so will yours. You will spend the rest of your life running, hunted by those who want the mark. There is no safe path left for you, human." The silence that followed pressed in on him like weight. He thought of Serenia's eyes when she saw the scar, how it had been a mix of hope and desperation. He thought of the Syndicate soldiers on the docks, of the way the power had surged through him when he fought back. And he thought of the Gate, somewhere out there in the darkness, waiting. Raylis broke the silence. "If you're going to do this, you won't be alone. The Syndicate already knows we're helping you. That means I'm in this fight now, whether I like it or not." Marin stepped closer, holding out a small crystal shard. It pulsed faintly with the same light as Daniel's scar. "This will guide you to Serenia. She is already moving toward the Gate. If you find her, you will have a chance to reach it before the Syndicate." Daniel hesitated, then took the shard. As it touched his skin, the scar flared briefly, sending a warm pulse up his arm. He could almost hear something feigned a whisper, like a distant voice calling him forward. Marin's expression softened. "Whatever happens next, human, remember this: you were chosen not for your strength, but for your choice to protect others. That is why the Oracle trusted you." Daniel closed his hand around the shard. The warmth of it felt like a promise. He didn't know what the Gate of Echoes truly was, or what he would have to face when he found it. But he knew one thing: he was done running. Serenia had found him, and now he was going to find her. The freighter's engines rumbled again as they prepared to leave the station. Out in the cold expanse of space, the Syndicate was still hunting. The war was still raging. And somewhere ahead, the Gate of Echoes waited to be opened. The freighter burst out of hyperspace into a black, silent stretch of space. Before them, dominating the view, was the Gate of Echoes. It hung suspended above a lifeless gray world like a monument from another age. The colossal ring was carved from black stone that seemed to drink in the light around it. But along its surface ran thousands of glowing runes, each pulsing with a faint silver-blue light. The runes moved in sequence, like a heartbeat, as if the gate itself were alive. Lightning-like energy arched across the massive structure, illuminating its edges in cold flashes. Daniel stood at the viewport, his breath caught in his chest. The crystal shard Marin had given him pulsed in his palm, perfectly in sync with the burning scar on his hand. It wasn't just a pull, felt like the gate was calling him. Captain Raylis leaned forward in her chair, eyes narrowed. Well, human, there's your myth. The freighter descended toward the surface of the dead planet. The land below was nothing but cracked stone, jagged cliffs, and ancient ruins, half buried under centuries of dust. At the center, like the base of a great mountain, the gate rose from the ground. Its open arch was filled with shifting light, as though the stars themselves were swirling inside. The calm didn't last. Rayla's console beeped sharply. Contacts 3 Syndicate interceptors and 1 cruiser already in orbit. They're ahead of us. Daniel's stomach tightened. Can we avoid them? Not unless we want to sit out here and wait for them to finish whatever they're doing down there, she said. We go in fast. The freighter dove through the thin atmosphere, skimming over jagged ridges until Raylis found a landing spot behind a cluster of stone spires. The moment the landing struts touched the ground, Daniel was already moving. He stepped out into the cold, dry air, his eyes fixed on the gate in the distance. And there's at the base of the arch stood Serenia. She was a shadow against the glowing ruins, her torn cloak whipping in the icy wind. Her long, black, canned purple hair was tangled, her cheeks marked with dust. But her eyes, those luminous violet eyes, locked on him instantly. You came, Shu said when he reached her. You found me first. Daniel replied. Her gaze fell too. His hand? The mark. It's awake now, isn't it? Before he could answer, the low roar of engines rolled over the barren ground. Syndicate dropships streaked across the sky, coming in low and fast. The ground shuddered as they landed. An armored soldier spilled out, weapons ready. Serenia's expression hardened. It's time. She took his hand without hesitation and pressed it to the stone pedestal at the base of the gate. The scar exploded with light-blinding, pure white blue that ran through the stone like veins. The runes along the gate flared brighter and brighter, and a deep hum filled the air. The archway's swirling light expanded, becoming a storm of stars. The Syndicate commander stepped forward from his troops. His black and gold armor gleamed under the gate's glow, and his voice carried easily across the battlefield. Hand over the human, Serenia. You cannot stop what is coming. Daniel moved in front of her. Not going to happen. The commander raised his rifle. Then you die with her. The Syndicate soldiers advanced, their boots pounding the stone. Blaster fire erupted, painting the air with streaks of blue and red. Raylis and Corvin burst from the freighter, weapons blazing. Serenia moved like liquid steel, her curved blades slicing through armor with precise, lethal strikes. Daniel grabbed a rifle from a fallen soldier and returned fire. Taking cover behind a cracked pillar, the battle raged. Dust and smoke swirling around the gate. But for every soldier they dropped, 2 more pushed forward. Over the roar of weapons, Raylis shouted, Daniel. The gate's open, we can't hold them much longer. Daniel turned toward the archway. The swirling light inside was no longer just stars, it was forming shapes, shadows of something massive beyond. The scar burned like molten metal, and in that moment he understood the gate wasn't just a doorway. It was listening. It was waiting for him to decide what came through. Serenia fought her way to his side, breathing hard. You have to. Choices, she said quickly. Open it fully and bring through the weapon. End the war now, but once it's here, no one can stop it or seal it forever. The war will go on, but the weapon will never fall into their hands. Ow. Blaster bolts scorched the ground nearby. The Syndicate commander was pushing closer, his voice cutting through the chaos. Choose, human. Give us the weapon, and we will spare your life. Daniel's heart pounded. The weapon could save worlds or burn them. His hand trembled as he pressed it to the central rune. Energy surged up his arm like a river of fire. Serenia's eyes locked with his calm, despite the chaos. She would follow his choice, no matter what it was. He made his decision. The scar flared with light so bright it drowned out the battlefield. The swirling vortex inside the gate began to collapse, folding inward like a dying star. The runes dimmed one by one, and the ground shook as the archway sealed shut with a thunderous boom. A shockwave rippled out, hurling Syndicate soldiers to the ground. When the light faded, Daniel fell to his knees. His hand was pale now. No scar, no glow. The power was gone. Serenia knelt beside him, her voice soft. "You chose life over victory, Aurelius." And Corvin helped them up. The Syndicate troops, stunned and leaderless, began to retreat to their dropships. The gate stood dark and silent, its secrets buried forever. As they walked back to Worth of Freighter, Serenia looked at him. "You gave up the one thing that made you different." Daniel shook his head. "I gave up power. That's not the same as giving up everything." She smiled faintly, and for the first time since they met, her eyes held only trust. The war would continue, but the deadliest weapon in the galaxy was gone forever. And as the freighter lifted off, Daniel knew that whatever battles came next, he would face them not because he was chosen, but because he chose himself.